All right.
Yep.
So we'll spam one more time, at least for now, the link to the call doc. In there, we've got today's agenda written out, as well as kind of a bunch of tables that's kind of really meant to be our form to try to capture everybody's input on. So we'd really love to encourage everybody to jump in and participate right in the document with us. If you're not able to pull the document open, you want to unmute and express an idea, Betsy or I can capture and put it in for you, or if you typed it in chat. But otherwise, we'd love to have you in the call doc. You want to go over the agenda quickly, Betsy, and then I'll take the first question.
Sure. All right. So welcome, 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 everyone. We're glad you're here today. This is the CARC student workforce team. I don't know, Tim, did you want to do a shout out for the staff before we get started?
Yeah, Claire and I are on the staff workforce development as well. So we meet trade-off between staff and student for the meeting. So this meeting is a student. We're both working on a paper for CARC. It's a paper on onboarding, and it's taken the work that we've done together over the past few months since last year's Nexus Day at CARC, where we talked about onboarding and all the things associated with that. We developed a checklist, and so we're, as a group, we're working on that paper. So come join us. There's a number of drop-in sessions, so you can drop in for as long as you want, for as little as you want, and start some writing. I've set up some Slack channel and a couple documents, and I'll drop that in the chat there for people to see. And if you have questions, just don't hesitate to reach out to me and come join us and get your name on a paper and contribute to the effort to develop an onboarding checklist for staff, student, and all things RCD.
Thanks, Tim. So today we're going to cover, so Brian and I kind of took a step back and we said, what are the things that we really want to start to explore to get more artifacts out into the community. And one of the things that have always kind of kept coming back to us in questions is funding models. So how do you fund students? Where do you start? So if you're writing an ROI, you want to get your community or your organization to buy into students, like where would that money come from? So we're going to talk about funding models today, the hiring processes in terms of job descriptions, interviewing, who does that from, and then again, this is all from the aspect of the student. And then if we have time, as time permits, we're going to talk about onboarding in terms of who actually will make the onboarding. So who does the onboarding? Is that the HR? And then is that versus a mentor and mentee? But one thing I want to make sure that we're very clear about, this group does not kicking off a mentor mentee interest group. There is already one in CARC that is doing that. And if you want to learn more about the mentor mentee opportunities, Claire, myself are part of that interest group. So you can reach out to us if you want to join that group. So for there, we're going to just go ahead and get started. If you haven't entered your name in the attendees list, you could please do so. We only use that as a point of reference. We don't use that to spam. All right, Brian, you want to kick us off?
Yep. So what we've got now is down below is kind of in outline form, a set of the questions from the agenda, as well as the tables that were kind of set up there with a bunch of blank rows, with the hope that we can encourage people to jump in here, enter in your institution's name and maybe give a description of what you do for these various things. If we need more blank lines, we're happy to go add them in. What we'd like to do is just kind of hover on, each of these questions and each of these tables at a time, allow people to type things in, as well as to allow anybody to unmute, discuss, ask questions, whatever else. We don't have a specific intent to have to finish every single one of these questions in here. If the conversation wants us to spend time on one of the earlier ones, we just simply like to get as far through this as the conversation allows us to. So the very first one is asking about funding models, looking at how various groups approach funding their student workers or student program. Feel free inside there in the description to be as detailed as you'd like, highlighting successes and maybe highlight questions and or challenges too that your particular institution is observing. So, kind of a point of reference, Betsy and I have kind of pre-answered our parts on a number of these. I expressed for U of U, we use department funds to pay for the student workers, but we have explored the option of a cost recovery, where if a particular research group PI came back in with a specific request, whether we could cost that out to them and dedicate maybe somebody a much larger portion of their time to that project for some time. But we have not actually used that yet.
Yeah, and on the Purdue side, we're really fortunate because we not only do, we have a lot of grants in play, and for most of you out there trying to get a new program off the ground, one avenue is to think about when you're filling out those awards, that broader engagement, maybe using that as part of where you can secure funding. So Purdue has utilized that, as well as we are fortunate in the fact that we actually set aside general funding for student employment, which is really hard for universities to do because to get the administration to understand the ROI on student employment is one of the areas I think that we're hoping, as we figure out what type of funding most of the universities are doing, can we leverage some of that to build out an ROI for the folks on the call that don't have a student program or just trying to get one off the ground? Because your biggest challenge is trying to get the administration to buy into the opportunities here. Looks like we're getting quite a few answers. The other thing that we are doing through this is, if we see things that are really interesting and or you want to volunteer in future calls, we'd like to take a much deeper dive on each of these topics and specifically say, well, how are you doing that? So again, if you want to indicate up by your name that you're interested, or reach out to me or Brian, like in the future, if you'd like to be participate on a panel discussion with any one of these topics, please let us know, because we will be taking a much deeper dive once we understand what our community, what the answers are from our community.
Or even to flip that around, if you see a particular need of better understanding for something, maybe you don't have the answer yourself, but you'd love to see a community discussion, please call it out. And again, everybody is welcome to unmute or use chat throughout questions. Let's give at least a couple of minutes for everybody to finish typing what they want, but feel free to discuss whatever we'd like in the moment.
I'll jump in briefly just because we're actually trying something new this semester. So we have, I think, with the more common pool of just general funding that we spend to hire students, but we have these new partnerships this semester, and it's a bit of an experiment. So we'll see how it goes, although it seems off to a very good start, of partnering with academic units to hire students as either graduate research assistants or graduate teaching assistants, which means they get tuition support. Which of course is very desirable. We've had students leave because they get another position that has that support, and we've all supported them doing so. But in this case, it's basically that something like we're paying the salary and the academic unit is paying their tuition or waiving the tuition for specific purposes that are supporting the goals of both units or advancing their education. So it's let us hire master's students for the first time in a while, who have a bit more background and some can focus on specific projects that are useful to those academic units, but also broadly applicable to support the Research Computing Center.
So just make sure I'm understanding then, are you having the other departments help, provide that funding, or are you providing the funding?
So roughly speaking, we're paying their salary and the other department is paying their tuition.
Okay.
That's a rough estimate of what's actually happening, but
we've been interested in this, but have not had any action on it. So that's fascinating to see what you're doing.
Yeah, well, as I said, it's new. We've only been doing it for 6 weeks now, so we'll see. We'll see if it endures, but it definitely seems like it's off to a good start, and we've gotten some good students out of that.
Looks like we still have one person. I guess I also wanted to point out one thing we uniquely do at Purdue that maybe other universities, and I'd be interested to see if any other university unmutes and talks about this, but we have a data mine initiative here at Purdue, and we work with some 80 some corporations. And what we do is we put students into groups of people to work with corporations, and they pay for the students' employment during that period of time. And in this situation, it's almost always strictly data science. But as that organization is growing and the more corporations we're getting, it's kind of interesting because corporations have needs for full-time full stack developers, system administrators. And what we're seeing is that through that engagement, we're getting the corporations are starting to ask for more students in a broader range of students. I didn't know if any other university on the call today is doing something similar. Okay.
I'll say something different and not structure, but there is that need. So NC State, we do not have a student program specifically the way we would call it, but we do use students, especially within the high performance computing group and the research facilitation services. And I run the interdisciplinary project. So focus on solving specific problems that are related to any project that has multiple disciplines involved.
Mm.
And so we do build a lot of workflows, infrastructure, and even though I'm looking to hire an applications developer, we don't have the bandwidth and we rely a lot on students.
Mm.
So when a proposal comes in or a project comes in and I look at it and I see that there is a lot of software development involved, I recommend hiring a student. So the student stays within the faculty's group, but I oversee the development activities of the student. And hopefully down the road, when it becomes, because there is equally a training component involved, maybe we structure that in a way that it's actually a student program. So they are paid in two ways. So sometimes it's just stipend, and especially when the proposal comes in very early. So you have, for PhD students, it will be stipend and tuition waiver as well. And then within the research groups, you have general funding, money allocated for that supports the student. General documentation and testing, things that we don't want the staff to spend too much time on it, but it's mainly will be good for a student. Yeah.
Mm. Nice. Thank you, Jacob. Brian, it looks like folks are starting to move on. Should we next?
Yeah, let's go ahead and slide to the next one.
Okay. So the next one is really talking about pay rate raises and advancement. And Brian, and as we were thinking about this, we were thinking about this in terms of retention or pathways to full-time employees. So not only do we want to hear about how much do you pay students an hour, and if you have a range. I see some people are sticking to like $16 an hour as an example. So one of the questions we had is, do you come in at that $16 an hour? Do you grow? What does retention look like? Describe how raises, advancement, retention might look like. And do you have an established pathway for folks to go from part-time employment to full-time employment? And then when you do find that good match. So if you could, I know it's hard to understand like maybe what you're paying for people, but if you have even a range, and then more importantly, do you have a pathway or a dedicated a program that gets, when you find a good student, to get them promoted from part-time to full-time? And if anyone wants to unmute and talk a little bit about what you're doing, we'd love to hear it.
Maybe I'll seed a little bit because this is one I have a particular interest in. The U view is notes there. We have a starting range of approximately 15 to 17, and that depends upon which unit, because the hospital is part of our campus student program, and there's some cases where they start a little bit higher. Regardless of that starting point, we do monthly sync ups with a student lead. And so long as the student is meeting expectations, if not better, over the next 6 months, then there's a automatic 50-cent raise, every 6-month cycle. There are opportunities to go out and to retain somebody who's maybe got a specific skill set, that they've developed that you would like to keep them on, but maybe they got a better offer somewhere else and you're just competing to keep. Not necessarily for full time, but we've used that a little bit. We have a couple students who are involved in a project that we have called Arbiter. And it takes them a bit of time to get up to speed, and they're ones we'd like to retain just for that investment in them. What we struggle on is our pathway to full-time. If we didn't do this until that student graduated and then started the process, or let me word it differently. If we did this by waiting, it's not nearly as challenging, but often we're seeing them a year plus or minus a little bit before graduation as somebody I would like to latch on to, and they seem interested. We're struggling with that kind of at the HR job code level. I'd love to hear if anybody has a better solution.
We do have a few comments in the chat that I'm going to copy down below because I think they're really good feedback. So Jim, I saw what you put. I think that's really interesting. And Paula, I really appreciate what your comments are there. I don't know if you want to unmute and talk a little bit about some of the struggles you're facing and things that you see are obstacles, because I think what you had put there is something that Brian and I actually talked a lot about. And I was recently corrected that soft skills means that technical skills are considered hard skills. And so we were trying to like describe, like, if they're not called soft skills, are they called like people skills, human skills? Like, go,
Managerial.
sorry, what did you say?
Managerial.
There you go. Okay.
Right. So in fact, I just came from a session of other academics here who hire students, and how do they hire students to teach within, and so we're all liberal arts, we're just undergraduate. So it's peers teaching peers, and how do they help those students figure that out? And one of the things was, don't ever tell them they're getting training. Tell them they're getting professional development, and it just flips their little brains to, it flips anybody's brain. I'm okay, train me how to use a calendar. Oh, great, But if somebody says you're doing professional development, it's immediately clear that this is about you getting better for yourself. And so when I work with my students, I spend a great deal of time. My time with them is converting what they're telling me that they're doing into metacognitive processes for themselves. Oh, how did you learn that? Oh, what about that surprised you? Oh, all of these it's almost therapy, right? But don't ever call it that, obviously. But you're telling them to see what they're doing. Certainly at Carleton, they're going 110%. They're just flat out, and then they get sick and they can't understand why they can't do anything. But that's a maturation process. Helping them get their metacognitive head into the game and articulate what it is that they are doing. And I literally, nearly every exchange I have with students is explaining why it's important to do that for their future. Yes, you need to be able to communicate what you've just done. If you can't communicate it, then it's not great, because it's not sustainable for anyone. Future you needs to know what you did. Why don't you write a document that describes that? Where are you going to put that document? What are you going to call it? And then we slide right into fair data principles, and we slide right into, and I'll pull the jargon in all the time when I can, but I never pull the jargon in without saying what it is. Because fair data principles sounds like a thing, but you can also make up what it is. And in your conversation, you can have a conversation with somebody. In fact, I have around the world had conversations with people about open science, and they know exactly what open science is, and it is not what the world thinks of open science, but a subpopulation of open science people believe firmly that it is open access to journal articles, and that's it, right? So that kind of miscommunication happens at all levels, and if you can mitigate that at the student level, there's a lot more that benefits everybody. I don't know, I kind of rambled there, but
No,
yeah,
thank
any
you.
questions? I have the data squad model is exported. It's gone to UCLA. starting up at Toronto. And there's a couple of other institutions that have taken the handbook and just used our handbook and modified it for themselves. So that's something that I'm happy to share with anybody.
I like what you said there about toning it as professional development instead of training. I threw an extra little bit there that kind of, I think fits, at least spoke to me the way some of your other comments went of, around the documentation, that could be a little bit like training. It sounds like a burden. Why do I have to do this? But if we talk about it in a way of like, hey, we're gathering information together that you can submit for a poster, a paper, a talk to something. And, and this gives you an opportunity to gather some additional stuff for a resume or experience. And you can make it more personal to them.
I'll even practice job interviews. Tell me about what did you experience in a project that didn't go well and what'd you do about it? Right. I mean, that's a clear job interview question. And then they can talk about it immediately because they've had practice. Takes a lot of time, and that is not indicated on the sheet. I think by soft skills, I'm kind of filling in. It's not just a checklist. Okay, the resume is done. Next, right? It's a constant flow of give and take with students who, if you haven't noticed, are significantly different than we were at their age. I don't care how old you are in this group. The current batch of students is very different. So they need some extra help.
All right. Brian, are we?
So let me highlight something about our sets of questions. At the end of each section, we kind of have a generic, what did we miss here? And so this is really meant to be, what should we have asked or what else should we have explored for each of the sections? I see that some people have already jumped in with some great feedback there, but we'll have that kind of with each of the sections. We'd love to kind of have that round out the conversation and give us a better view. So please feel free to add stuff there as well. So people are also going ahead. That's perfectly fine too. So I think that takes us to where we can start talking about the next section, which is the hiring process. And again, feel free to go back to anything you want to add more to or go forward. But the first question we have in the hiring process is job descriptions. So we're kind of looking at both who writes them. Are they a generic one versus role specific? Maybe to illustrate this a little bit, our campus's program is, a campus-wide program. And so there's actually a high-level generic job description shown for that one where people pre-apply to and kind of are interviewed at a high level from. And then when there is a specific position within a group, then there's a detailed one written. And we have, in our case, the person who's going to oversee that student write that detailed description, because it's often driven by that request from that full-time person to justify the student position. But curious kind of how others do. Everybody's already jumping ahead and getting stuff in there, but feel free to unmute and add to the conversation too.
We did not ask this question, but one thing as I was seeing people put in their responses, one thing we probably should ask here is how often do these job descriptions change? Are they changing by semester? Do you review them yearly? Do you change them based on where your technology is currently sitting? Um, the reason I bring that up is because, recently a lot of universities are starting to do more of the um, Kubernetes kind of thing. And so like to post for a sysadmin position probably wouldn't, for a student, is probably not an accurate thing. You'd probably do something kind of hybrid. And I didn't know if folks are seeing like their technology is changing rapid enough in their university that the job descriptions also are changing, or are you leaving them fairly generic?
think I'd partially answer that, kind of playing off of one of the SharePoints that was given earlier, that Michael had given. Kind of in contrast, where his group is starting to dabble with bringing in the graduate level. We've been primarily focused around undergraduate students, and so me having a systems team focus, I'm often, preparing some job description content, expecting a student fairly early in their college career. In fact, I really would love them the first year, because then potentially I get them for almost 4 years. And so I'm honestly excited when I find somebody who built their gaming rig at home, played with a Raspberry Pi. It's bonus points if they can actually say anything about Linux. I'm spending most of my time looking at whether or not this excites them, because I feel like I can teach them all the technical skills. And if we do get somebody that applies that comes in with those technical skills, that's just a really pleasant bonus.
Thanks, Brian. Anyone else have similar ways they go about hiring?
I just wanted to talk about one specific case which is unusual. Earlier this year, a student reached out to me and said he wanted to interview me for his English class. And so he came, and I suggested that he can work in our group, and he was really interested, so we hired him. And he is doing really well, and it's a first-year student, just like you, Brian, So sometimes you can get students from unusual places.
Marina, that's actually a really good point, because as a research group, you're usually out in well, I know our research group is the research scientists are out in the community working with other grad students. So I wonder, if there's an opportunity that you can also take advantage of in those same kind of communities for undergraduate. I don't know. You got me thinking, though.
Let's see if I can add a comment here. I was trying to put it there in the chat. So in the way how we have gone about our program, we are fairly new. We just started last semester, mid-October. So, it was about 10 weeks last semester. And, we're just trying to see if we can get the 15 weeks for this one. But we went about, asking for very generic things, right? So some experience with DevOps, nothing related really to HPC or Linux, because that was actually the piece that we were offering then, that's the thing that they will come in to learn, right? And we did a lot of effort at the beginning and get into the workshops that our team was already teaching. That was basically part of their onboarding process, right? But we were focusing more, to have a little bit of the programming skills, a little bit of DevOps, right? So that they can jump into, making changes, adjustment to our website or announcements, some media experience. We also have one student that has done a lot of YouTube videos in the past. And so we are leveraging that experience into making our training, right, asynchronously, so that they can be in 5 minutes sets kind of thing. And, that student base with experience that he has, something that he has been able to just jump and roll into that. And then when it comes to everything right now for this semester, we're focusing a lot into those aspects that you talk about, the Kubernetes, all containerization. And so, but at the same time, we're also providing the training through the workshops that we are teaching.
So Gladys, you would be an interesting person to interview maybe come fall, if you're open to this, because I'd really like to hear, since you've been you're getting your program off the ground for this year, maybe in the fall, if you don't mind, Brian and I should interview just to see all of the things, all of the obstacles you've gone through, the pros, the cons, the kinds of things, because I think that would be a really nice, again, artifact to help with people that are thinking about getting a student program off the ground.
Absolutely. I can tell you.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Many of the bumps that we had to go,
Okay.
And it's still some of the questions that we cannot yet answer, right? That I had to figure it out, how to justify.
Yeah, that would be awesome. If you don't mind, I'll reach out to you and see if we can maybe schedule something for the fall and start to frame up, because I think people would really love to hear these challenges, because it's scary to get into this if you don't know what you're getting into. And I think having that having that someone like you that's where it's real fresh in your mind would be really really rewarding.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy to.
Okay. All right. Oh, nice. I really like the comments that people are putting in. This is really good. Brian, should we move on?
Sure. I think we're ready for
Okay.
the next.
All right. Is it, I guess we're to job postings next, right? So the next thing we were talking about is now that you have the job description complete, where and how are you advertising? Are you using mostly word of mouth? I see people are starting to put in the chat like they're using clubs. That is amazing. But one of the ideas here again was to get the community to talk about where is the most effective way you are doing posting and where are you getting your biggest hits, because again, as we're thinking about producing artifacts, one thing would be, tips and tricks on where to advertise and how to advertise. So if anyone has like a really nice success story, or even like something that completely went sideways in terms of promoting your job, if you'd want to unmute and talk a little bit about where have you gotten the best benefit when you're advertising, and where has it kind of gone sideways? We'd love to hear those stories as well.
Let's see, I would like to comment here just because our experience was much better than what I expected to be. So I was really concerned that because we were, finally getting approval to launch the program in the middle of the semester, right? I was really concerned we weren't going to get anyone. We got over 30 applications or so, right? And then I had to close the posting because we were getting too many, and I have already chosen my candidates. And we did it. I worked directly with a person in HR that did the student temps. And it was more key of the way how we went about creating the job advertisement, right? The things that we were asking for and the things that we were offering. And we use, through HR, I think that students have different portals where the jobs are posted. So we use the one for staff, Workday, and we use something that they call here Handshake, which are just portals that students use for looking for jobs. I use also the HPC user list that we have. So it went directly to those. And all the venues that we had within the Virginia Women and HPC too. And so we were able to advertise that way. And we got, like I said, it was overwhelming amount of candidates. And I selected at least 20 and I interviewed 10 of them to just pick 5. So it was very, I will say I feel very happy of the way how we conducted the process.
That's amazing. You got that many students.
Way too many. I wish I had more funding so that I could have more, but because the plan was to have a cohort, right? Instead of hiring one at a time, I wanted that 5 of them or 6 of them to start at the same time. So to do the onboarding and one shot.
So Gladys, you just go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, this is an area where our program has a characteristic that's both helpful and limiting all at once. So by having the students first apply to the general program and they're kind of given a cursory interview, they're kind of already categorized by their interests and their backgrounds and things like that. So that when I actually open a position myself, I don't get to see the girth of everything that's applying into the program. It's kind of a filtered down list already. The challenge we've run to, that even though that feels successful because we're not interviewing ourselves too many people, is when I open that new position, if I have something new I need, everybody's already been pre-interviewed and that question wasn't on the table at that point. And so it does become a little bit challenging to keep those general interview questions on point for how things change with time.
And is it most people's experience that when you do put out a posting that you get that kind of traction that Gladys was talking about? Because 30 applications, 50, like that is unheard of, I think. When we get like 20 applications, I'm pretty excited. I'm just fascinated by that. I don't know if anyone else has seen the same kind of traction.
I've had 2 experiences. First, my previous institution, I will post a job description, and usually I have a lot of hits. I think in one specific case, I had about 100, but you have to go through and sift that to see if they even meet the minimum requirement that you put down, because they're just applying because it's a job. And you end up with about 20 applications that you think you can work with. And then you start down setting down the criteria, how you want to recruit. I did that for a couple of years. And since my students were always coming from computer science, so it became very well known to the department that quite often I need students. And they would generally recommend students with the type of skill sets that I need. At NC State, it's still the same. So most of the time I'm looking for full stack developers. And usually the great place for me that I figure is master students. Some of them come in with already programming experience, and are just after they graduated college, so they're getting a master's. So it's easy for me to get from there, and it's cheap labor rather than getting a postdoc, for example. So that reference goes along. So sometimes you want to even get students from the physical sciences, because sometimes the objective is equally to train them. So their knowledge of science, but you have a number of training, the number of tools that you want them to go through and understand. But just the fact that they see full stack and they're coming from maybe physics, math, or physical chemistry, it's just a no, no, no. But at least I would like to see somebody who say, well, I know how to program, but I think I can do this. And I'll be very, very happy to work with a student like that, because the motivation, once it's there, you can throw anything at them and they will go for it.
Marina,
I see your hand up.
yeah, Marina, you can unmute.
Okay. So I talked about this special case, but usually how we get students is Iowa State is hiring a lot of students for the Solution Center. And that manager, she knows the students. And when other groups are looking for students, she can recommend someone from her group from the Solution Center to work for us. And also she helps a lot with the hiring process. And she can see through all those applications and find better ones for us. So if your institution has a solution center that hires students, maybe it would be a good idea to collaborate with them.
That's great.
I have to mention too, Betsy, that early and at the beginning of the fall semester, we have different outreach events that we do for grad students and undergrad. So we knew that the program was coming. We had no that job posting yet available because it needed to be approved, but we started advertising that research computing was going to have opportunities for students. And so that was another way of doing the, advertising all across grounds here. And I just shared right now the job description that we use and the way how we went about making accessible.
Yeah, I saw that. I think I'm going to pull it in. And Gladys, it also made me think about one of the things that, and I don't know that we can do this through CARC, but what would be interesting is if you could do a student job board, or like have advertisement for summer internships. Because as everyone was talking, this is the one area that I don't think any of us are competing for the same types of people. I'm going to attract different people to come to Purdue as student, and they're there at Purdue to get their education, not to have a job. So like this is one area that we're not going to compete, except for maybe in internships. But it'd be interesting to see if we could have a job board of sorts available through some mechanism. I don't know if it's CARC or whatever, that students can actually go look at and say, oh, hey, I go to Virginia Tech. I didn't realize there was a job. Or hey, the Indiana University has a really cool internship this summer. I should get on board there. So I just, as everyone was typing and I was looking, I'm like, that might be an interesting thing to look at. Jacob, go ahead.
Yeah, so one thing that we miss on is, or just focusing, I think we're focusing more on the job and the payment. So at NC State, we have another component, which is actually getting credit for what you've achieved. in addition to being paid. So the grad student that work with me, so they get evaluated and they get credit for that because they're learning and doing all the development, programming, testing, having all this environment is a skill set that they've gained. So, and it's well written, described, and then they get a grade for that as well.
Thank you. Jim, did you have something?
I did, yeah. So I put a couple comments in there, and one of the things I put in that I've hired some bad boys where I've been involved with, they're like, well, this guy totally reverse engineered the API to the student system and then used it as a service to get people into classes that they were on the waiting list for. And I said, well, is there anything wrong? Do we document how many times you can call the API? He's like, no. I said, well, then why don't we hire the guy? Because we're working on our student portal system. Why don't we hire the guy and work? So we did that. And then the other thing is that there's a lot of kids that are students, undergraduate students that have already signed their lease for the whole year. And they need an internship, but they don't want to leave town and they don't want to have to get a lease in another town. And so central IT can, research computing can be a thing for summer internships for them. And I often would just coordinate it with the internship coordinator in various colleges, like our information sciences and technology college, or like I did with a writing internship, I coordinated with the technical writing advisor in the English department. So those are ones where they can usually say, I got just the person for you, I think, and so kind of going that more direct route, I think you have better success in getting people.
Agreed. Gladys, go ahead.
Yes, I just have a quick question here. When you guys are talking about internships, how do you go about aligning that with the student program? And I asked the question because so far for me, we have been approved, and I had to be very careful with the leadership to make sure that we were calling this not just like a student program, but, like a student workers, so student temps and, we had to be very careful with the wording here. And so if I come and I just jump and I bring the word internships, it's going to be like, oof, brains blowing up, right? Because how do you justify that unless you really have all the funding to do that? But so I guess I am wondering, how do you go about the internships? How do you advertise that, or how you even are funding that?
Does anyone else want to comment?
Well, I was just going to say that's a great question. And in order to do an internship, there's requirements from the college about a certain number of hours, and we would often give input on the grades for the internship, work with the person's advisor who was the professor of record for that internship, and give input on the thing, and then have them coordinate sort of weekly updates with the faculty member that was overseeing the internship. As far as funding it, we always seem to have funding from central IT for funding a certain amount of internships. With regard to the internships, a lot of the colleges say, well, they can be unpaid. And that was always against our policy because we didn't want to get free work out of them. We wanted to actually reward them for their work because they were helping us, but we could also get them some experience toward their, internship class requirements, whether it was like a couple credit hours or just the fact that they needed to check off the internship box for their major.
All right, Brian, should we move to the next question?
Yeah, so we're getting close on time, maybe another 5 or 6 minutes. I feel like the conversation is fairly well, at least opened the conversation on the postings where we post how we advertise word of mouth. So kind of in light of time, maybe we'll poke the question of, is there anything around that somebody wants to surface? And if not, then please feel free to step into the interviewing one. Yeah, it'd be good if we could try to, wrap up reasonably around this section.
I do have some insight on word of mouth because my hiring is entirely word of mouth. As I came from the front desk, I'm still very close with that office of the our main central IT department. And there's kind of a history of all of UM's IT used to be distributed IT, and then basically when COVID started, a lot of that independent funding got cut and was centralized into UMIT. And so it's now kind of a smaller, tight-knit, tighter-knit community of IT. There's still some of the satellite offices and folks who don't chat a whole lot, but I do spend a lot of time at the front desk, and that's where we get our, where they get the student hires to fill the front desk. And that's where the money goes for any of the student hires in IT. And so I'm always talking about what I'm doing and, you know, kind of sharing with them as well as seeing who's there and what their interests are. And I do often find students who are very curious and very interested in research computing. And that helps me kind of gear like, okay, maybe this person will be great for a little project here, and we can kind of discuss with their managers and supervisors about, you know, possibly bringing them over. I do have one student that we're trying to build out a career pathway thing. And more generally, Central IT is trying to create career pathways so that students can start as a help desk technician, and then depending on their interests, they can go to cybersecurity, they can go to research computing. And because I sort of got pulled into research computing with no real formal process, we're kind of cart before the horse, um, building out our career pathways. And so at the moment, I have a student with a template document, and he's actually in the meeting, so he's hearing this too. But we are kind of filling it out as we go along. We've given a student research computing facilitator title and job description, and then we have a big list of all the things that he should know by the end of it that would make him suitable for the potential FTE position of a research computing facilitator that we're kind of pushing on the back end to get created through HR. But there is a lot of Wild West kind of trying it as we go along. But definitely it's quite easy to get the students' interest and like find the students, at least for me. And I don't need a huge pool because it's hard to find enough like time to actually give like all the interested candidates things to do. But we do have some really great students over there at the front desk that I want to pull in.
You'll have to keep us posted on how that's going, because again, I find that might be a really interesting future topic for us to hear about this experience, and I think people in the community would be interested in that as well. Great comments coming in. And as people are finishing up and want to discuss more, one area we really didn't cover here in the doc, but what else? What else does this community need from us? And Brian and I are not here to dictate or organize every single thing. If there's a topic you're really passionate about and you want to present it here, or you want some support in lifting that up to the community so we can generate ideas, please drop it into like the future area down below. If you want to do a presentation, you have a great idea or something we are missing. So you've been to these meetings a few times now and you're like, well, nobody's actually talking about X. Like, I'd really like to learn diversity, equity, inclusion, and how does that impact students? I don't know. I'm making up a topic because we really want to make this team, this community very robust. And again, I'll go back to, and this is one area we don't actually compete in. This is us just collaborating and lifting each other up in the community.
One comment that I would like to add, Betsy, here is, for me, I guess one of the burning things happening is we started the program, we're in the second semester when we are, they are beginning to feel more at ease because they understand what is required from the job. And we have, a list of different projects and they understand a little bit more about the concepts of HPC and how those tie to all the different aspects. But now it comes to the question, how we go about actually measuring that is being effective, in the sense of, when we presented our proposal, right, was with the idea that we're going to relieve some of the time of the staff, right, to help them. And we justify it in that way, but how we go now really about measuring, how we quantify that, how effective it has been, that all the investment that is in, what we're getting out, and we can talk about projects, but how we go about really measuring in terms of, what the leadership really will care about, right, in terms of the money.
That's awesome. I really like that topic. Gladys, I'm gonna add that to under the future, because I think that's a great topic.
Yeah, I do too. So that
Because
brings us up to just a few minutes before the top of the hour, and trying to be mindful of everybody's next meeting that you probably need to rush to. Is there any last minute comments anybody wants to share? I think we've made it well enough through the agenda for what Betsy and I hope to do. This has been fantastic, but open for any last moment thoughts, ideas, comments.
And I guess the other thing I will say, if you're interested in being part of this leadership, we're always looking for people to help. So the more the merrier. Oh, Michael, I like your idea. How do we hire students elsewhere?
Yeah, it was sort of interesting that you all, several of you said we hire from the community college, we hire from others, and we can only hire our own students. There was some talk of hiring other students within the system, so we're part of the University System of Georgia, but even that hasn't been approved. So, interesting, because I think we hire people as student employees, which is a specific classification. That's different.
Michael, if I could jump in real fast in the waning moments here. We have hired so many people in our administrative computing area from the community college that we turned around and we've supported it fully, because it for years, when they taught about mainframe computing, it was like one of the few places you could get talent that could just step right onto our administrative systems and support them. And that's pretty much still the case in terms of our computer science and our IST students are not interested in doing administrative computing. So we get most of our hires in that area from the local community college.
Yeah, I did notice that our CS bachelor's students have a higher starting salary straight out of college than any of us make, so it's a little tough to hire them sometimes. But that's definitely, because I know other parts of IT do hire a lot from not community college, but one of our local state universities, but that's always after they graduated, not while they're still students.
I really don't know how it is with the other institutions, but in our case, with all the students that we brought to the interview, they were really surprised that the salary that we were offering for the hour, I guess it was a lot higher than what they expected, or what they might have been paying in other places. And so I think that was a good incentive.
That's actually a good future topic as well. Like how do you go out and evaluate the salary range for your students? Because at one point at Purdue, the salary range for the central IT people was so low that anytime research computing would post a job, we'd get every applicant from the central IT because we paid so much better. But just understanding, like, do you when you go out to look at salaries for students, do you do that across the university? Do you look at your state? Do you look at? I think that's a great future topic. Okay, Brian, we're
at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and close up the recording, and really do appreciate the conversation and participation from everybody.
Yeah, it was really great seeing everyone.
Thank you.